Here with a good friend of mine, Tony Zucca. Tony, how long have we known each other? Gosh, probably 15 years.
At least 15. Good old Dan Snow.
That's right. I remember when we first met and I started following you on social media, I would see you do the Bataan Memorial Death March. And I had no idea what it was. I was just following you on social media, watching the content. And there was one post in particular that really stood out. You were on the side of the course, sitting in the dirt, eating like a can of beans or something by like a mile 17 marker. Do you remember the post? Do you remember the
No, that first year I stopped a lot. So it could have been mile 1.
That's what really got me intrigued, just watching this and just understanding, not why you were doing it, but what that event was. You're going out there, you were rucking 26 miles, 26.2 miles in the high desert at White Sands. This was a full day event. You trained for it, you prepare for it on some level, mentally, physically, all that. And I just thought it looked really cool. So I knew I wanted to get involved. And you had invited me your second year and I declined. I didn't have the time, whatever it was. But the third year I did take you up on your invite. And that's when I started to really understand what the Bataan Memorial Death March is and what that's about. And the events leading up to the original Bataan in 1941 and how it all unfolded. And our brave men that were over there fighting without supplies, with their backs against the sea, the surrender, the forced march to the 3 different camps. And the more I got involved in learning about the Bataan Memorial March, the more I knew I wanted to participate in. I wanted to partake in it, not just as a fitness thing or an endurance challenge, but just to go there and show my respect and show my support. So for me, I was introduced to the Bataan Memorial Death March because of you. But you have that direct attachment to it. It was your grandfather that was in the original Bataan Death March. He was one of those brave men forced onto that march, and he stayed in those camps for a certain amount of years before he was able, fortunately, to make it back stateside. So what I would love for you to do is just kind of give me a little bit on your take of the Bataan Memorial Death March. Any stories maybe you know about your grandpa, maybe tell us a little bit about your grandpa, and then why you continue to go down there and embrace the sock and get down there every single year with that special kind of fun that it is, as we know now, the Bataan Memorial Death March. So tell us a little bit about your grandpa. Tell us what you might know about him.
I wish I could tell you more. Unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot. So my grandfather, he did survive the march itself and then the 3 years of torture in the POW camps. And he made it home, but he didn't make it too long. He died, I believe, when my dad was 3. So my dad didn't know him. My oldest aunt is the only one with really a faint memory. And I was a punk kid. Never took the time to ask my grandmother about him because, again, I was a punk and out of sight, out of mind. I never knew him, so whatever. And there was a book called Ghost Soldiers that my aunt got all her siblings, including my dad. And again, I didn't read it because I was a punk. And it wasn't until, well, after my dad died and I was off in officer school in the Army, had no time to do anything other. I was like, I'll finally read this book. I'm in the Army. He was in the Army. It's a good time to read the book and find out about my grandfather. So I'm laying in my bunk, reading it and getting deep into it. And all of a sudden it just hit me like a ton of bricks. So I'm 26 this time. It took me 26 years to mature enough to care about my grandfather. And I start reading it about all the people that were dying on the march, all the people that were dying in the camps. And my grandfather survived all of that. And it's just like, what a badass,
Yeah.
So it just, in that moment, is like, I want to know as much as I can. I want to honor him as much as I can. I literally, the heaviest part was I would not be in that bunk at that moment reading that book had he died like thousands of other people died, because he wasn't married yet. No kids were born yet. I mean, nothing, no Zuccas would have been had.
The family tree would have ended right there.
Yeah, I would not have existed. And that's a heavy feeling. So literally him being a badass and surviving all that is the reason I'm here talking to you right now. That's when I really started caring. And I was like, I'm gonna, as soon as I get back from officer school, I'm gonna start asking my grandma about my grandfather. She died 2 weeks before I graduated officer school. And that's a regret I'll never get over. But that just made it even more important that I maintain his memory and honor him. I found out about this annual Bataan Death March, and it's been going on for almost 30 years now, something
30, 35, somewhere there.
Or even more than that. Yeah. And when I got to my last command at Scott Air Force Base, one of the civilians, who's a retired Army guy, I was talking to him about it. I had yet to do it at this point, and he was one of the original people. He was stationed at White Sands Missile Range back in the 80s, and he developed the first march and the route and everything. And it was almost like it was meant to be that I was supposed to meet him and just have a discussion, and finally kicked me in the ass to go do it. And then here we are. And I told my aunts I would try to do it, health permitting, because I'm a broken old man, every year until there are no more survivors. So here we are. But now we have to deal with a pandemic, and we're getting, hopefully there's still some survivors left when we're able to get back on the course, hopefully next year. He didn't walk the same when he got back because he dealt with a lot of pain and injury, and he didn't like this. Couldn't look at chain link fence, couldn't look at rice because he had about all he could eat. What little he did get to eat for 3 years, it was rice. So just a tough guy. And I have a half sleeve. This is all about him, his POW time, 42 to 45. I believe it was April 42 to January 45. So almost 3 years full, tortured by the hands of the Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah. It was horrible is what it was. I try to keep this PG on some level, but your grandfather was a badass. So many brave men did not make it home. Very fortunate that he was able to, get out of there and get home. So now we can have Tony. How many years have you completed the Memorial March, the Bataan Memorial?
What was it? I did 5. I think I've done it 5. And then 1 year I couldn't get out there. Scott Air Force Base had their own their own death march. So 6 I've done in some capacity, but 5 actually out there at White Sands. And then I hope to do the virtual one this year as well.
Yeah, virtual will be new to us. We can talk about that. But before we do, let's just maybe give everybody an idea of what happens down at White Sands Missile Range, because I went down with you my first year, and I've done now, I think, 5 years as well. This will probably be my 5th year, actually. So I've completed 4 years total. And for those who have never been there, it's an experience. You get down there, you fly in or you drive in into La Cruces, New Mexico, and you get over the mountain range and you get into White Sands Missile Range and go in the day before, and you grab your bag and you grab everything, you check in. I prefer to camp there on White Sands Missile Range.
You have that.
Yeah. So after picking up my bag, I pitch the tent, and a couple of us will always go there, and you wake up the morning of and you throw the weight in your bag. I know that you're a big rice and beans. You put them in the bag, you get your weight up, and you get to donate that food at the end of the march, which makes it really cool. So I've always followed your suit. I don't stage a bag. I don't prep a bag. I don't get it right to 35 pounds. I do what you showed me the first year and just keep tossing stuff in there until it feels heavy enough to ensure that when you cross, it'll be over 35 pounds. And it's about 5:30 in the morning. You're loading up your rock. You're getting ready. You hit the corrals there at the beginning. You're the staging area with thousands of people participating in the Bataan Memorial Death March. And in going back, the gentleman that you met that started it, there was about 130 original marchers on that course about 30, 35 years ago. And today, moving forward, pre-pandemic, I think they're up to about 7,500 marchers. So it really has gained a lot of attention. People understand why we march. Everybody understands the battle with Hitler and the arena that we fought over in Europe. But the part that people forget about at World War II was the Bataan Peninsula, right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese invading the Philippines, and Eisenhower making the decision to go into Europe and essentially sealing the fate of all of our soldiers that were stuck in the Philippines. And that's why I march. I didn't have a family member, but I have studied, researched, read enough now, participated enough now to know that we always have to be doing something to remember those brave men that were there, like your grandfather. I also follow your suit. I will continue to do the Bataan Memorial Death March until there are no survivors left. I think when we were there together at White Sands 2 years ago marching, 7 or 8 survivors were able to make it. I don't know. Do you remember how many were there your first year?
I want to say there's almost 20.
Yeah, so 20, and now there was 7 or 5 to 7. I mean, these guys are 100 now, 100 years old.
Absolutely. And an important piece I want to make sure is touched on during that staging process and opening ceremonies and everything. Every year they start with all the survivors that have since passed since last year's Bataan Death March, which is a sobering moment. There was 1 year in particular so some of the survivors, as you know, we'll give Q&A sessions during that Saturday before the Sunday march. And one year there's this great guy. I can't remember his name. I think it was John, but he's a great guy, full of life, animated, hilarious. And, you know, a lot of those guys rely on donations and stuff to get them out there. And I stayed with, after him, I got his address. I'm like, hey, I'd love to, you know, fly you back out or come see and talk to you. Cause he thought he might have known my grandfather, but it was a long day. And who knows? He could have just said, I could have said, do you know Ryan Kelley? He would have said, yes. I don't know, but I was willing to take the trip to see him and find out. And I told him I'd be honored to fly him out to next year if he was able to make it. And I wrote him and I never got a response back. And then that next year, his name was listed as one of those that passed away. And that, you know, that took the Bataan Death March to another level for me, because now I've actually known somebody that they read the name off of. And so that's an important part of the event for me, is those names getting read off every year, because there aren't that many left, man.
You know, one thing there at the march, as you're watching everybody go through the course, is seeing the pictures of their grandparent, you know, their grandfathers on their rucks. There it is. Behind them.
Safety pin.
I find myself about mile 17, you know, just thinking about that, you know, what these men went through. And that really, when I want to quit at mile 17, you know, that's where my mind is. But by mile 22, you couldn't pay me to stop. You know, I'm going all the way through, blistered up feet, you know, hernia, whatever it might be. I still keep that march going. This year, let's talk a little bit about that. They're doing it virtual. Last year, actually, let's go back. Last year, we were ready to go, and they canceled it about a week before. Yeah, it was the week of. And that was the introduction of COVID for us, really, or the effects and what we were going into, because in my world, that was the first thing that was canceled. When I got the email from White Sands that they were canceling the Bataan Memorial Death March, which was the week up, a few days out, we were getting ready to leave. I was in shock, like, what is this? This is silly. Why would we cancel this? And then later that evening, they canceled the NBA season. So that day was the start of where we got to, of course. They did not have the march last year, but this year they are attempting to do it virtually. And then hopefully next year we're back on base. So virtual, good and bad. You don't get to participate in the morning ceremony. You don't get to hear those names maybe. You don't see the Blackhawks. You don't see the paratroopers. You don't hear the national anthem in English and then the Philippine national anthem. You don't get to see the survivors with their wives or their children that are there to help them to show up and shake their hands. You don't get to wait in line outside of those classrooms to hear them talk. You know, you don't have any of that. But you do have the opportunities to still get together to support the cause and to march and memorialize and remember those men that died. So on one side, I'm obviously very upset we're not on our way down to White Sands to get the march done. But on the other side, it's, hey, it's still getting done. And this actually opens it up to a bigger audience. You don't have to fly down there. You can do it in your own city, your own state. You can make your own 26.2 mile course. And I told everybody in our company, I said, if you wanted a year to complete the Bataan Memorial Death March, this is your year to check that off. You're not going to be in the sand pits at mile 6 and 7. You're not, or on 22 towards the end. You're not camping like I do on the dirt. You're going to miss a lot of great stuff, and I hope you'll have that again in the near future. But this is a great way to do it and spread the word of why we do march and get that word out and allow even more than the 7,000 or 8,000 people that have been doing it in person. I don't know the numbers now, but I would bet that there's going to be a lot more people able to do it now. And it will bring more attention to people like your grandfather and the whole death march and what it is. So I'm hoping something good comes out, that 20,000 people can march and so many more people can learn about this tragedy and what happened there. And so I'm kind of looking forward to it. We have 22, 23 people in my company doing it in different states, which is pretty cool. I would usually only take 2 or 3 with me to White Sands, but now I can invite everybody. And it's a week long. You don't get a week to complete the course, but you can pick your day, Sunday through Sunday, or however that looks. And it just spreads it out. They're doing it a month later this year. And although I don't know why, I would assume it's because the people up north letting the weather get a little bit better to be able to participate in it. I am looking forward to it, at least to be able to do it again. But I'm really looking forward to get back on White Sands. I wanted to thank you for your time. Thanks for introducing me to the Bataan Memorial Death March, because in return now, every year I've taken 2 or 3 people, and every year different, and then they go back and they take people. So it just helps it grow, and it's just raising the awareness of what was going on in the Philippines. So much is on to Europe and Germany and all that, as it should be, but we quickly forget, so easily forget about those 10,000 POWs that were surrendered to the Japanese, US soldiers. There was also 50, 60,000 Filipino soldiers that were also, forced on this march. We can't forget that as well. But because of you introducing it to me, I've introduced it to other people. And together, as long as we can keep the Bataan Memorial Death March growing and going, more and more people will understand what your grandfather went through to protect this country, to protect our freedoms, to protect our rights, and to put you in that chair right now, because here you are. So thank you, Tony. Thank you for your service. Thank you to your grandfather. Thank you to your entire family. And thank you for introducing me to the Bataan Memorial Death March. And yes, you will do the virtual this year, because I'll come up to Tennessee and I'll drag you 26.2 miles. We'll get it done.
I'm sure I will.
I know you will. Well, thank you again, Tony. I really appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you real soon, sir.
All right, buddy. Thank you.